Hi everyone, Gundam here for a 30th and brand new episode of our special edition Lore of the Universal Century. Today, we're going back to the 1-year war era in an attempt to answer a particular question, which is... Yep, in this video, we are going to explore the origins of the Zeon Counter Gundam, from which mobile suit did it spawn, its relation to the Zaku series, and prove how it is in the end, basically a Zaku on steroids. But let's start by the beginning. What is exactly the Gelgoog? Codenamed MS-14A, the Gelgoog was a next-generation general-purpose mobile suit, introduced by the Principality of Zeon in the waning days of the 1-year war. A high-performing model meant for mass production, the Gelgoog was a revolutionary machine and the final success of its manufacturer, Zeonic, over its main competitor Zymad. Indeed, Zeonic had once held the mobile suit market in their grasp by designing mainly the Zaku line, and had maintained the status quo by collaborating with Zymad, first for their own goof and later for Zymad's dome. However, Zeonic had been much displeased by the fact that Zymad's new space mobile suit, the Dome, had been chosen over their own Zaku High Mobility Type, and had thus decided to design a new mobile suit in order to win back the favor of the Zeon Navy. The Gelgoog was this direct answer to the Dome victory, and proved to be a resounding success for the Zeonic company. First, unlike its contender created by Zymad, the Gyan, it was a general model, and it soon became clear to everyone that its frame versatility would be extremely high, something very useful for mass production and local warfare. Secondly, the Gelgoog was basically the suit the Zeon top brass had long awaited for, mounting a generator capable of supporting beam weapons, thus enabling the Gelgoog to wield not only a beam rifle, a first for a Zeon mass production model, but also a beam Naginata, aka twin beam sword. Aside that, its overall performance, including cruising speed, end-back and frontline potential, was extremely close to the levels displayed by the infamous RX-78 Gundam series of the Earth Federation, a first for a mass production type on both sides. Now, this did not mean at all that the Gelgoog was devoid of flaws, quite the contrary. At the time of its creation, the United Maintenance Plan, which aimed to implement the standardization of Zeon mobile suit cockpits and the use of titanium alloy on ceramic composite, was already implemented, and sadly, the Gelgoog was not able to benefit from it outside few later variants. This meant that the regular Gelgoog retained the outdated steel alloy armor, in a time where the stronger titanium and ceramic composite was becoming the norm for mobile suit armors on both sides, making the Gelgoog less durable and heavier. Worse, the cockpit and command controls were yet again brand new, which forced Zeon pilots accustomed to Zaku's or Domes to spend time to become familiarized with the Gelgoog's new controls, which required retraining even veteran soldiers just for them to be able to use the new model. Outside that, the Gelgoog excellent handled weapons were sadly not complemented with any kind of inbuilt weapons, which made the suit very easy to disarm, as cutting the end holding the rifle Naginata would cut down all its range armaments. Despite all of that, the Gelgoog remained an amazing mass production mobile suit, and the Zeon Navy immediately started adopting it and launched its mass production as early as December UC-79. Unfortunately, such machine appeared too late in the war for Zeon, with only 165 units being manufactured out of the 738 planned and only 67 of them participating in the fateful Battle of Abawaku. After the war, the Gelgoog would become a rare sight, as not even the Zeon remnants possessed too many of them, but its legacy would nonetheless live on. First, in the form of its more advanced variants, which remained relevant in the following years. Then, by the Gelgoog High Mobility Types, being used by the Republic of Zeon, then under his descendant the Garibaldi Beta, fielded by the Federation forces, much later in the form of the Gelgoog, deployed by the Axis Zeon forces, and ultimately the RF Gelgoog of the late UC Mars Zeon. Still, the Gelgoog history is a tricky one, and we are now going to see how the mighty Gelgoog is actually nothing less than a Super-Zaku. January UC-79. The 1-year war was in its early stages, and yet the Principality of Zeon seemed not too far from achieving total victory. The Zaku series of mobile suits, introduced by the Zeonic Corporation, was a thunderous success, with the Zaku 2 line, at that time represented by the C-type and the post-Antarctic Treaty version, the F-type, having decimated the Federation ranks, notably during the famous Battle of Loom. However, the Zeonic Company was well aware that wartime caused rapid technological innovation, and anticipating any federal breakthrough, plans for a next generation of Zakus were immediately drawn. At that time, the greatest asset of mobile suits resided in their mobility, and Zeonic hoped to capitalize on this field, thus starting the so-called High Mobility Zaku plan. For the following 4 months, Zeonic went back to the design board, and in April UC-79, the development team finally gave a first result, in the form of the Zaku 2 High Mobility Test RP type, also named the Prototype Zaku 2 High Mobility Test type. This new Zaku was based on the Zaku 2 F-type, but was already in a whole other league. Simply enough, the Prototype RP basically boosted all the features of the regular F-type, turning it into a brand new machine. Its backpack was enhanced through the addition of 2 main thrusters, which completely outmatched the original thrusters of the F-type and which were supposed to work in conjunction with 3 new sub-thrusters on each legs to improve its handbag stability. In order to keep up with all these new thrusters, the fuel tank, located on its waist, was also enlarged in order to store more fuel and prevent a drop in the cruising range of the mobile suit. Lastly, the RP received a new signature head antenna, which gave it better communication capabilities for improved battlefield awareness and control. In the end, Zeonic only created 2 of such units, which were both tested by the famed pilot Elliot Ream, the man known for having created the operating manual of the Zaku 1. One of these units was repainted in Ream's color scheme, which was red, but strangely, the other unit was not and was instead repainted in a regular green scheme. Between February and April, the 2 units would be tested extensively, with Ream's unit being tested by Shin Matsunaga himself, who greatly praised the design behind the RP and used it in live combat. At the end of the day, the RP was too expensive, of course, but for Zeonic, it was now time to mass produce it. As soon as Ream approved the plan, the RP mass production plan started, and after some time, this new mass production version of the RP Zaku, named the Zaku 2 High Mobility Test R1 type, made its appearance. Despite being a mass production variant of the RP, the R1 had some essential changes made on it, most of them meant to facilitate the mass production. The most important of them was the downsizing of the leg sub-thrusters, which at that time in the Universal Century was a synonym of lower performance, but was supported by additional micro sub-thrusters to retain the performance of the original. Additionally, the R1 had its original unique fuel tank located on the waist, separated between multiple tanks and moved to the torso and legs. While the head antenna of the RP was removed, decreasing its communication abilities, the number of external power cables was slightly increased, resulting in better responsiveness in the mobile suit limbs. The R1 was ultimately approved, and the 22 units produced were dispatched to several aces for field testing, including notably Shin Matsunaga, Brannis Ox, and even Nimbus Stürzen. While the R1 became quickly popular among frontline pilots, Zeonic was ultimately unsatisfied with it, and plans to improve it were quickly drawn. The plans to produce an improvement over the R1 type finally spawned the Zaku High Mobility R1A type, which was notably the first fully fledged Zaku High Mobility type and not anymore a high mobility test type. The R1A was essentially a field modification of the R1, which was performed by Zeon engineers based on the feedbacks from the R1 pilots. Primarily, the fuel tanks of the legs were changed into cylindrical cartridges, which didn't have to be refilled but replaced, something which improved the R1A operating time since it didn't require to have a mothership to refill its leg thrusters and because its escort could transport additional cartridges as spares. In addition, the R1A received an escape pod, something which was quite unusual on a mobile suit at that time, if not a complete rarity. The success of the R1A was unexpected and thunderous, and the suit was immediately approved for limited production, with 56 units being produced in total. Among these, 11 were older R1 units upgraded into R1A, while the other 45 were brand new units built from scratch. However, for Zeonic, the R1A was not yet the results he had expected. Yes, the model was popular, widely celebrated, and boosted a higher performance, but it was also tremendously expensive for what it had to offer, and the initial goal of turning it into a mass production model was compromised because of that. Even worse, the unit was so difficult to pilot that no average pilot would be able to use it to its intended potential, making it fit for only a handful of top aces. The Zaku High Mobility Type project now seemed a dead end, and the project itself very close from being shelved. This was without counting the devotion of the Zeonic engineers involved in the project. Despite the R1A relative failure, they wanted to keep the Zaku High Mobility project running, no matter the cost. Unfortunately, an opportunity was soon presented to them. Back in early UC79, some in the Zeon top brass had anticipated the possibility of the Federation finally fielding its own mobile suits, and in the light of such a possible event, had advocated for the development of an adequate response to keep the Principality's supremacy. Zeonic had eagerly responded to this request by establishing the so-called XMS-11 project, codenamed Gelgoog, but with Zeon's successive streaks of victories and the Federation's lack of mobile suits, the plan had eventually stalled, with most of its engineers instead focusing on their own petty project instead. Over time, the idea for this possible MS-11 evolved into a vague concept, taking the form of an advanced Zaku capable of using beam weapons. However, things changed radically by September UC79, with the Federation finally revealing its masterpiece, the RX-7802 Gundam, and the other results of their V project. This shattered their expectation that the first Federation mobile suits would be subpar models, and convinced the top brass to wake the MS-11 project from its slumber. Since the MS-11 was only an unfinished design-born idea, most of Zeon manufacturers rushed to claim its ownership, with Zymad notably pledging its services to realize it. Zymad proposed to realize the MS-11 under the form of a mobile suit using their early plan for the Rigdom, but quickly backed down after realizing their inability to answer to the beam weapon requirement. With Zymad out of the picture, the engineers of the Zaku High Mobility Project jumped on the occasion and volunteered to take care of the project, with the premise of their MS-11 taking the form of a Zaku based on the R1A. One of the 56 R1A was once again brought inside Zeonic factories and underwent a series of EV refitments, finally emerging as a new machine, known as the MS-06 R2P, aka Zaku High Mobility Test R2P type. Theoretically, the R2P was everything the MS-11 plan asked for. With an upgraded generator output and new cooling systems, the R2P could use a brand new prototype beam rifle, which was exclusively powered by the generator provided energy, giving it an edge against ECAL's base beam rifles fielded by the Federation mobile suits. Even better, the general performance requirement in terms of speed and MBAC was largely met by the R2P, which also improved the design of the R1A legs with new armor parts, increasing the protection of the leg thrusters by making them less exposed and safer to use. In October UC79, the completed prototype was finally brought out to the testing ground, with the famed Elliot Rame returning to serve as the test pilot of the machine. The R2P was subsequently used for a mock fight near Granada, emulating high-speed combat, and it was during this public test that the R2P would prove its performance, but also its numerous flaws. First, the model suffered from fuel shortages, and despite the engineers fixing the issue by adding propellant tank in the skirt, another crippling problem would soon deal a harsh blow to the R2P Zaku. The model was soon found to have issues operating its beam rifle, with the improved cooling systems being insufficient to recoil the rifle and handle the thermonuclear reactor output. This meant that the R2P rifle could only work as a low-grade beam gun instead of a beam rifle, which was extremely disappointing for a mobile suit meant to take the mantle of the MS-11. This failure made Zeonic finally realize the seriousness of the MS-11 requirements, and inside the company, voices advocating for the creation of a brand new model, as opposed to an extension of pre-existing series, which the R2P was, became louder, and it was at that time that the notion of a Gelgoog mobile suit was first heard. The Zaku High Mobility Project then decided to abandon the MS-11 and instead passed the model number mantle to the Pezun facility, which succeeded several months later by creating a decent MS-11 in the form of the Act Zaku. However, budgets and results were still a thing, and Zeonic knew their idea for what would be known as the Gelgoog would be buried if they didn't give any results to the Principality. The Zeon Navy, considering the MS-11 idea, not yet mature, but still needing a new mainstay next generation model, Zeonic decided to recycle the work done of the R2P, hoping to use it to provide this in-between mainstay model to the Navy. The company plan was to secure trust and funds again from the Navy, and use it to move forward the Gelgoog plan while recycling their older assets. The result of Zeonic's conscious plan eventually materialized in the form of the infamous Zaku High Mobility R2 type, probably the most famous iteration of the entire Zaku High Mobility series. Based on the chassis of the R2P, the High Mobility R2 type was a massive upgrade, and the peak of high mobility technology applied to any Zakus at that time in UC. While it retained the new leg design of the R2P and most of its external frames, the R2 streamlined the mobility features to work with its new generator, giving it a better mobility than pretty much any Zeon machines at that time. Ice on the cake, it was even lighter than the R1 and R1A high mobility Zakus despite the addition of a new chest piece, weighing only 75 metric tons thanks to the use of a lighter variant of super hard steel alloy. The fuel tank was also renewed and could now carry 18% more fuel than what the R1A original tanks could. In addition, the R2 type received a new antenna, called the Stabilizer Horn, which granted higher communication capabilities than any of its predecessor and better battlefield awareness. The combination of all these assets resulted in an outstanding machine, and when the proper MS-14 Gelgoog finally rolled out some months later, the Zaku High Mobility R2 type gained the nickname of a Gelgoog in a Zaku skin, proof of its amazing performance. However, the R2, unlike the R2P, could not use beam weapons at all, due to the additional generator output being required to power up the more complex mobility systems. When the Zaku High Mobility R2 type was presented to the Zeon Navy, it was welcomed with a thunderous applause. Performance-wise, the unit was everything asked for a next-generation machine, and the top brass celebrated the concept and the performance displayed. However, when it came to the cost, the R2 received a much colder welcoming. The price per unit was still too high, and the top brass decided to instead go for the less performing but more cost-efficient Rigdom proposed by the rival Zymat company. The Rigdom was also able to win over the fire-powered field over its contender, which cemented the fate of the Zaku High Mobility R2 type. Despite losing the competition, the concept proposed by Zeonic wasn't wasted away, and the top brass still decided to dispatch the 4 completed R2 units to some ace pilots. Among these, one was assigned to Johnny Ryden, the famed Crimson Lightning, one to Gaby Hazard, the 6th highest scoring Zeon ace, one to Robert Gilliam, 7th highest scoring Zeon ace, while the last one was instead given to Zeonic's most famed test pilot, Elliot Rame. Even better, the Navy faith in Zeonic was also revigorated, and necessary funds were provided to the company for their Gelgoog plan. Now with revived trust and funds, Zeonic could move forward with their plan, and the Gelgoog project officially started. While Zeonic was going to extensive lengths to secure the approval of the Zeon Navy through the R2, they had already started moving forward the Gelgoog plan by manufacturing parts, notably armor frames, some of which had already been introduced in the R2. As soon as the project was approved, the already produced parts were brought in, and it was decided that the new mobile suit would be directly based on the R2 type, in order to speed up the development. Due to his old partnership with Zeonic, Elliot Rame voluntarily relinquished his old Zaku R2, which became the base for what was still called the Phase 3 of the Zaku High Mobility Project. The Zaku High Mobility R2 type was then brought to Granada, where it was extensively modified and transformed into a new machine, the MS-06 R3S Zaku High Mobility R3S type. Among the changes applied to the base R2 was the inclusion of the future Gelgoog type parts manufactured earlier, and the renovation of most of the back waist, which received new thrusters. In addition, the increased generator output, now of 1390 kilowatts instead of 1340 kilowatts, now enabled the safe use of a custom beam rifle alongside the mobility features, but because of stability issues, it was decided that this new Zaku would equip a heat saber rather than a beam saber. As a mirror to the RX-7802, the Zaku R3S type also received a pair of head-mounted Vulcans with an ammunition caliber of 50mm. The result was a more than satisfying proof of concept, and the development staff soon started to call it Zaku 3, and in later stages referred to it as the Gelgoog early prototype. However, everything didn't went smoothly as expected. Because it was already nearing completion when the united maintenance plan was implemented, the Gelgoog early prototype not only never benefited from it, but actually suffered from it, due to the renovations made to the rest of the Granada arsenal, notably the Zaku 2Kai and Rigdom 2, causing production delays to the whole R3S completion. Still, the first unit was finally completed in mid-October UC-79, and 3 additional units were produced from it, bringing the number of these machines to 4. Because of the continuous delays, it is said that the engineers were eventually forced to use bodily parts from the Zaku 2Kai to speed up the creation of the 3 units built from scratch, but to which extent is still not known. One of these units would be used by ace pilot Thomas Meyer, while another would survive the war, being collected in a museum collection. Yet, as the Zaku R3S development was not even in its earlier stage, a different experiment was simultaneously being held by the Zeonic company. This particular experiment regarded the nature of the beam weaponry supply that the future Gelgoog mobile suit would eventually use, and should it adopt a beam rifle using E-caps cartridges like the R3S tested, or instead follow the pattern of the R2P with inbuilt beam weapons powered exclusively by the suit's generator. To explore this concept, Zeonic colluded with their rival MIP and also enlisted the help of a subcontractor named Albert, specialized in high output generators used in amphibious mobile suits. Together, this three-party alliance started their own development plan, and using the Zaku High Mobility R2 as a base, eventually produced a different machine, called the Zaku High Mobility R2S type, named as such as it was completed mere days before the R3S. Like its codename suggests, the R2S was a machine strikingly similar to its predecessor, but unlike the R3S, which was created from a retrofitted R2, it was a machine totally built from the ground, and for good reasons. The R2S main innovation was a pair of powerful chest-mounted beam cannons, directly powered by its generator and which required drastic changes to the mobile suit interiors in order to accommodate such weapons. Due to MIP being overly specialized in mobile armors, the design of the R2S eventually morphed accordingly to their development philosophy, which resulted in the R2S adopting a heavier-than-most armor and an anti-fleet rule which its beam arsenal easily enabled. The concept was almost excellent, and yet again, new problems came to plague Zeonic efforts. Despite MIP and Albert's best efforts, the generator output of the mobile suit was unable to power the pair of beam cannons, meaning the model now failed spectacularly at the very thing it had been developed for in the first place. To solve this, MIP proposed an enlargement plan meant to mount a bigger and more powerful generator, which resulted in an increase in size and the R2S becoming taller than most mobile suits. When this proved to be not enough, Albert then introduced the so-called Energy Backup Use Escort Unit, a peg-leg mobile suit which could dock with the R2S and provide a stable energy flow to power up the two cannons. While this finally fixed the issue, it came at a great cost of most of the R2S efficiency, as the backup unit was essentially a flying generator an unlucky pilot would have to man, which means the R2S pilot would now need to protect its escort partner and couldn't fire anymore its beam cannons in high-speed combat either. With this kind of mediocre result, the Zeonic staff colluded in using the beam concept of the R3S design for the Gelgoog instead, and dropped the idea pioneered by the R2S, which meant, no, the Gelgoog wouldn't use inbuilt beam weapons. To avoid wasting the resources sacrificed for the R2S, Fritz Guderian, the project lead engineers, recycled the completed machine by gifting it to Dozul Zabi for him to use as a military parade mobile suit. With the R2S wild ride coming to an end and the R3S completion, the Gelgoog project finally closed its preliminary stage, and in late October early November UC79, Zeonic finally kickstarted the early plan of the long-awaited Gelgoog project. Soon, the company produced a first result and presented to the Navy their first entry to the Gelgoog series, the machine known as the YMS 14S, aka Gelgoog Prototype. A prototype version of the planned mass production Gelgoog, the Gelgoog Prototype was essentially a polished version of the Zaku High Mobility R3S, standardizing and refining its assets while affirming its position as a machine distinct from the Zaku series. The bodily armor of the R3S was redesigned for EV combat, adopting rounder shapes for better ballistic resistance, while remaining adequate for high-speed combat. This change of shape also favorized the integration of the power cables of the machine inside the frame, a stark departure from any Zaku-derived mobile suits. In terms of weapons, the new mobile suit retained the beam rifle of the R3S, but due to better generator tunings, it was now able to wield another beam weapon, in this case, the signature beam Naginata. As a bonus, the Gelgoog adopted a full-handle shield, which equipped an internal layer made of durable Luna titanium. However, and for unexplained reasons, the head-mounted Vulcan system of the R3S was dropped in the Gelgoog Prototype, something which could be explained as an attempt to cut down production costs and speed up development. Nonetheless, the final result was a game-changer machine, displaying excellent performance primarily thanks to its beam-based arsenal. The suit quickly won the favors of the Zeon Navy, overshadowing its only competitor at that time, the YMS 15 Gian proposed by the Zaimat company. The model was replicated in a 25 units production run, with 24 being assigned to the Chimera Corps, while the remaining unit was sent to Ace Pilot Shah Aznavour, with the goal being to collect data to improve the final design of the incoming mass production variant. Their feedbacks praised the quality of the prototype machine, which resulted in fewer changes being made to the mass production Gelgoog than what was initially expected. Nonetheless, several changes were applied, with some of the connection hardpoints and equipment mounters, which enabled the Gelgoog prototype to be bastardized with additional or different parts, being removed in the mass production version, while the armoring was also increased, resulting in higher defense but lower speed for the mass-produced variant. Based on this machine, the regular Type A Gelgoog would eventually be produced, but even after the mass production, the higher versatility of the prototype Gelgoogs remained praised, earning them a retrofitment as MS-14S, commander versions of the regular Gelgoog series. With the Gelgoog prototype success, the Gelgoog development project came to an end, and at last, the Gelgoog series could officially start. Born to mirror the Gundam and the result of nearly 1 year of research, the Gelgoog stands as a worthy successor of the Zaku series, and should even be considered as the flag mobile suit of the late 1 Year War.
But who will survive?